Welcome back, church, to another week together here at Church Online. We always love to say a big welcome to new people. So this is your first time joining us here in this space online. A big welcome to you guys, wherever you are at home watching this service. We're going to keep going with our series from Genesis, and we've got an awesome speaker this week, our very own Michael Gilliver. This guy, he always throws some jokes out there. There's always really cool practical demonstrations, so I'm sure it's going to be a really interesting message. So thanks so much, Michael. Take it away.
I don't know if you pay attention to social media, but the other day I saw some terrible news. And that was that these have been discontinued. Have you heard this? That was devastating. I know, thank you. A moment in silence for pods. These were university students' favourite food to keep them up on sugar while they were doing assignments last minute. Or lay pastors doing a sermon for today, last night potentially. Fortunately, I Googled it, and it turns out actually it's only been banned in, discontinued in New Zealand. So we're still good in Australia, but in honour of our Kiwis, I've got some of these as prizes today. So we've got a few, thank you, the Kiwis. Sorry, this is the last time you'll ever get to eat these. If you win a prize today, you can have one. This is the end of pods, and we're kind of doing the end of a book of the Bible today. I don't know if you're new to church and all that sort of stuff, but we often talk about Bible things. It's a bit weird, I get that. This ancient book written a very, very long time ago, thinking that it still has something relevant to say to us today. Well, we're going to have a crack at that and have a look if there's something of relevance in there. And we're looking at the book number 1. It's called Genesis, and the last bit in Genesis has this guy in it named Joseph, and his brothers come up to him and they say, "Can you please forgive us?" And he says, I want you to turn to the person next to you and say, "Mate, go." And then turn to the person on the other side and go, "It's all good." Because that's what Joseph said back. They said, "Mate, it's all good." He said it in slightly different words to that, but that's basically what he said. They said, please, at the end of the book of Genesis, this book of beginnings, it ends with a brother saying to his other brothers who want his forgiveness, he says, "Mate, it's all good." Let's say it again. Mate, it's all good. And so we're going to learn a bit about how he got to a point where he could say to his brothers, "Mate, it's all good." And to do that, we're going to have to do a rush through of the story of him. You may have heard it. You might have seen it in a musical called Joseph and his something. Thank you. Technicolor Dreamcoat, which sounds awful, doesn't it? I mean, what a stupid name for a musical. To be honest, I just don't like musicals in general. Thank you. Yes. Not my cup of tea. Of the Andrew Lloyd Webber varieties, that's probably the least worst. There are so many shockers. Cats, Phantom of the Opera, terrible. Anyway, I digress. We are going to go as a steamroller straight through the story of Joseph, and I'm going to get to a couple of points. And if you know the story, and then you throw your hand up and know the next bit that happens, you get one of these. Okay, right? Yeah, cool. So the story starts with a dad. And I think this is great because we've got the creation story, we've got creation all around us, God doing these cosmic wonders to build the whole universe, and it quickly zeroes into a family. And the rest of the book is about a family. I think that's kind of cool. Hey, we're getting too... You're jumping the gun there, soldier. Far out. Who invited Stuart? Anyway, we're rushing through. Okay, so there's this dad, his name's Jacob. He's not a great dude. He does lots of dodgy things. And then he has 12 sons. Now, in that culture, having 12 sons is like out of control crazy. And he has them to 4 different women. For those who are mathematicians, that's 3 too many women, right? There's 4 mums to make these 12 boys. And there's 1 daughter in there as well. So 13 kids, this huge group. And Jacob is a dodgy dad, right? Like, in so many ways. One way, he has a favourite of the wives, right? There's one he's like, that's my favourite. Like, you've already made the error of having too many, and now you're playing favourites. And he doesn't only do that with his wives, he does that with his kids. So he's got favourite kids amongst the group of kids as well. And we all know that that's not okay. That if you out there who are the middle child and you know that you weren't the favourite, you know that's not okay, right? And who does he pick as the favourite? He picks the youngest. And so if you're the youngest, at this moment you know, yeah, that's right, I was the favourite, yes. My own son here is calling me out. The youngest, one of the youngest named Joseph was his favourite. And this made the other brothers really annoyed. And they had a dodgy dad who did dodgy things. And so these brothers, following the example of their dodgy dad, also did dodgy things. And so one day, this is an ancient culture, they were shepherds, they were out tending to their flock. Joseph comes up and says, "Oi, how's it going?" And they say, "Oh, we've got a great idea, let's kill you." That sounds like a great idea. And they have a little bit of, they grab him, they throw him down a well. There's no water in the bottom, so he's just sitting at the bottom of the well going, "Oi, this isn't how today was supposed to pan out." And they then argue, these brothers say, "Well, maybe we shouldn't kill him. How about instead who's got the answer? Let's go, Nicola. Sell him." Yes, you said that with great excitement. So I'm guessing you weren't a younger sibling. There you go. Second, there you go. That's right. So he got sold into slavery. In terms of a bad day, that's about as bad as it gets, right? Gets sold into slavery. And then from there, he gets taken to Egypt and gets sold a second time. And when he gets to this Egypt place, like they bring all the slaves out. Who wants to buy a slave? One guy says, "I'll buy that one. He looks like he can read, so I'll pick him." And he picks him and he becomes a household servant for who? Who's got the answer? Up there, Kels? Potiphar. Well done. Yes, that's right. The chief of the guards he is. I'm going to throw this one, okay, Kels? This is going to be embarrassing and everyone's going to watch. Hey, good catch. That's right. He became a household servant, which is, in far as being a servant goes, that's probably one of the better gigs you can get. An alternative would be like a farmer slave or a mining slave, and that was basically a death sentence. But to be a slave in a household, that's about as good as it's going to get. But unfortunately, it didn't work out too well. Potiphar's wife falsely accused him of a crime, and Joseph ended up in jail, right? So that's a really great story, going even worse, okay? Joseph's in jail, living the worst of all lives. He's a pretty good prisoner, though, and so he gets in charge of the other prisoners. Then after a bit of time, two fellas show up who used to work for the Pharaoh, and they have these weird dreams, right? And then God gives Joseph the power to interpret these dreams. Turns out they're not just ordinary dreams. These are dreams that foretell the future. And the result is that one of these guys gets to get his old job back for the Pharaoh. And what was his job? The guy that got to go back and work for the Pharaoh. This is a harder one. Down the front. Correct. Wine taster or cupbearer. Well done. Here you go. Good job, Grady. And he does something really good. He puts in a good word for Joseph. It takes a few years to do it, but he puts in a good word for him. So if you've got a mate that did something good for you, and then one day you have an opportunity to put in a good word for them, you put in a good word for them, right? It's biblical. Putting in a good word for your friends is biblical, right? You got to do that. Puts in a good word for Joseph. Then one day Pharaoh has a weird dream. It's not a normal dream. It's one of those future dreams sort of thing. Joseph gets a call up because his old mate's like, "I know a guy back in prison who, he was a dream guy." And he comes in, tells him what's going to happen. And then the Pharaoh's like, "Far out, you're right. Okay, well, you're in charge now." And so Joseph goes from being a prisoner to becoming second in charge in Egypt. And when we say second in charge, there's lots of seconds in charge in the ancient Egyptian society. They're called viziers, which in Australian government style is kind of like ministers, and you'd have a little portfolio of responsibility. And his was clearly to look after the food, the harvest and the granaries, or where we store the food, which is a really important job. Because what Joseph knew was going to happen is we're going to have 7 good years of good food and then 7 years where it's going to be no food. And so we're going to have to store a lot so we don't starve to death in the next 7. So the 7 good years come. We hit the 8th year, starvation hits. Joseph knows how to do it. He's been prepared. And then all of a sudden, something happens. The famine that was in Egypt spreads not just to Egypt, but into the surrounding area. And Joseph's old family back in Canaan are also starving to death. And they decide, well, we better go to Egypt and get some food. Not, of course, knowing that Joseph was now in charge. So there's the fast forward, right? That's the whole story in a second. We're going to pick it up and just spend a little bit of time at the moment where Joseph meets the brothers who 22 years ago threw him down a well and then sold him into slavery. And what then happens so that when his brothers say, "Please forgive us," he can say, "Mate, it's all good." So that's where we're going to pick it up. I'm going to grab my Bible. Here we go. It's Genesis 40-something. Where are we? 42, here we go. So Joseph's brothers, having done all this dodgy stuff, come to Egypt needing food. Now, when they show up, just so we're all aware, everyone would have noticed, because a family with 10 brothers, because there's one in charge of Egypt, right? There's 12 all in total, but now one's in charge of Egypt. One was the younger one again, and he stayed home. The other 10 all showed up. If 10 brothers to one dad showed up in an ancient society, everyone's like, whoa, that's a lot of lads. So these 10 guys show up, and everyone notices when 10 guys show up. Everyone knows when the Frasers show up at a party, am I right? Yeah, we're right. Because when a big family shows up, everyone notices. When the Gillivers show up, you got way too many kids, everyone notices, right? They show up, and as soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. He said, "Where did you come from?" "From the land of Canaan," they replied. And although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. "You are spies," he said. "You have come to see where our land is unprotected." So straight away, the first thing that Joseph does when he sees his brothers is he does not weep, hug them, say, "It's me, Joseph. Hey, I haven't seen you in ages, 22 years. It's been so long. You look so big. How are the kids?" Doesn't launch into this, but withholds something. He's trying to suss out what's going on. And I want to suggest here, I'll tell a little bit of the story, but I want to suggest a key idea here, okay? We'll do this together, all right? My son is learning sign language at the moment, so we're all going to learn a letter together, right? This is the letter F. Can you do this? F, that's right. F stands for fast, right? So forgiveness can come fast. But trust, we're going to do a T this time, T, right? Trust can take time. So what Joseph does here is he sees his brothers and he wonders, 22 years ago you threw me down a well and sold me into slavery and never came to find me. Can I trust you now? Have you changed? So what he does next is he puts him in jail. Then he says, one of you got to stay in jail, and the rest of you can all go back home and come back with your younger brother. He's basically replaying what happened to him, right? But the brother got taken away. He's like, I wonder if they're going to come back and find this brother, like they never came back and found me. So this is a story I think that might be helpful for some of you, because betrayal by family sucks big time. Betrayal by someone close to you hurts a lot. And it's quite biblical to forgive fast. Quite biblical. In fact, we're supposed to do it every day. You know, the Lord's Prayer, forgive us our trespasses. Like I said, forgiveness is a regular thing, right? But I think sometimes we make the mistake of trying to do the right thing by forgiving fast, but then also trusting fast as well. And if you have been hurt, if you have been betrayed, it is okay to not trust again quickly. It is okay to think, I'm going to forgive you, but I'm not just going to start letting you do everything you want again immediately. If you've got an employee who took money from the till and then you forgive them, the next day you don't give them unfettered access to the till again. You maybe make them do another smaller job for a while and work their way up until you think you can trust them, and then you've forgiven them. Forgiveness isn't the question here. This is a question of trust, because forgiveness can be fast, but trust can take time. So the story goes, they go back home, they speak to their dad and say, hey, that guy who was in charge of Egypt, he's kept one of our brothers behind, and he said, we got to come back and we got to bring our other brother with us this time. And if we do that, then he'll release the other one from prison. Oh, and other thing, when we got home, we looked in our sacks with all the food, and the money we had spent to pay for the food is back inside our sacks. And so we bought this, but we didn't actually pay for it because somehow we got given the money back. And so now we're in this double trouble problem here. And again, this is Joseph replaying what happened to him, because when he was sold into slavery, he was sold for $20, right? 20 shekels. And they got away with that. I thought, well, we'll pocket the cash and move on. And Joseph's wondering, will they just pocket the cash when they've got the opportunity again? Fortunately, they come back, right? They come back, they convince dad to let them bring their youngest brother with them. They come back and say, oh, here we are. We were here a while ago. We've run out of food again. We need to buy some more. We've brought the money we paid first time because for some reason it was in our sack. So here it is again. Plus, we've got even more money now because we need to buy some more food because we're starving. And so Joseph brought his brother out of prison, and kind of everyone thinks at this point in the story, and they're all now he's going to say, it's all good. All is forgiven. Look who I am. Surprise. Take the mask off. Scooby-Doo. Like that sort of thing. But that's not what happens. Joseph still is unwilling. It gets really close, actually. It's almost like he's just about there. He's going to reveal all, and all's going to be good. But what happens is that Joseph gives them a feast, and they're all having a good time sitting around a table. And it's like he gets to that threshold to forgive, and it's like, I just don't know if I can still. And so he ends up giving the youngest brother more food than everyone else, and intentionally showing him favor. Again, replaying what happened to him, right? Saying, I was the one that was favored, and as a result of that, I was the one that suffered. I wonder if they're going to make this guy suffer if I favor him. And this is the lesson I think you need to have. If you are in a situation where there's someone that you have forgiven, and you wake up one morning and think, I'm still really angry at them about that. I just want to make it clear to you that that's quite okay. That forgiveness will come in fits and starts, and there'll be times when you think, gosh, I thought I'd forgiven you, but this has kind of come up again in my head this morning. It's why forgiveness is a daily practice, because we've got to do it all the time. Forgive us our trespasses. Forgive those who've wronged us. We've got to do it daily, because if we don't, it can so easily turn back into bitterness and a grudge. And so Joseph tests them a whole other time, probably unnecessarily, but you can understand where he's coming from, because such a huge betrayal, 22 years ago, sold into slavery, no one ever came to see how he was going to go. And then they're back here, he's the one in power, he thinks maybe things are going to be okay now, and then he changed, like, no, I can't. And so he basically sends them off again, but he hides a cup in one of their bags, the youngest boy's bag, and then sends guards after them. And they search all the bags, and they're like, well, no one stole anything. You're crazy. Why would we do that? You're the most powerful guy in the world, as if we're going to steal from you. And then it turns out, oh, goodness, there is the cup in the bag. At this point, the other brothers don't know if Benjamin did actually steal the cup, like if the youngest brother did steal it. And so again, the opportunity is for them to turn on their brother. This is what Joseph, can I really trust you to look after your younger brother? And they come back. And they say, look, this has all happened. And this is the part I really wanted to draw attention to just for a moment, and then we're pretty much done, actually. Because then someone steps up to Joseph to speak. And this is the first time in the narrative that he has spoken since he convinced his brothers to sell Joseph into slavery. So last time Joseph heard this guy, his name's Judah, speak, Judah was convincing his brothers to sell him into slavery. And then he speaks again. This is a man who has betrayed his brother, who's committed huge betrayal, desperate for forgiveness, but knowing that forgiveness can't come without trust. And trust, of course, takes time. So it's in chapter, 44. Then Judah went up to him and said, pardon your servant, my lord. Let me speak a word to you. Don't be angry with us, though you are equal to Pharaoh. And then he goes on and retells a bit of the narrative. I'm not going to retell it for you there. But then in verse 30, he kind of wraps it up with this key part. He says, so now, if Benjamin, that is the son, doesn't come back with us, because Joseph is going to say, I'm going to capture him, I'm going to put him in prison, I might kill him, who knows? Judah says, if he doesn't come back with us, when I go back to my father and my father sees that the boy isn't there, my dad's going to die. He's saying that if I go back again without the younger brother, like I did 22 years ago, this time it's going to kill my dad. And we can only imagine the grief that a father would experience if the loss of two sons. And that's what he's saying. This grief will kill him. He says, we'll bring grey hair on our father and bring him to the grave. And I guaranteed the boy's safety. I said, if I do not bring him back, I will bear the blame. It's the key difference between the old Judah, is like, let's just sell this guy, to the new Judah that says, if he doesn't come back, I'm going to cop the blame. And it echoes a speech he gave just a chapter before to his own father. Because his father didn't want to let him take Benjamin. He didn't trust him to take the younger brother with him. But in 43 verse 8, Judah convinced Dad to let him bring their son down. He said, send the boy with me so that we, you, and our children may live and not die. And here's the key part. I myself will guarantee his safety. You can hold me personally responsible. And he finishes the talk to Joseph. He says, now then, please let your servant remain here. So he says, let me, Judah, stay here. I'll be your slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. Let's recap our lessons so far, and then I've got 3 quick things to tell you. So forgiveness can come fast. Trust can take time. But if you want to improve trust, if you want to lay down foundations of trust, and trust is the foundation of all relationships, right? So if you're looking at yourself and think, I want more friends, you're looking at your partner and think, I want them to love me more. If you are looking at your co-workers and think, I wish we would get along better, trust is a key foundation to building that relationship. And Judah here models for us the way that we can build trust, because trust is going to take time. The first step is that Judah is consistent. So from the moment he showed up, Joseph said, do these things. And what did Judah make happen? Those things. He did the things that they were expected to do. In terms of building trust, if you know that in some level you need to earn trust back with someone, step number 1 is to be consistent. When it's time to go to the thing, you go to the thing. When it's your job to be at the place, you be at the place. The second thing Judah does to rebuild trust is he takes responsibility. I say this particularly to the men in the room because in our society today, I don't think society expects us to take responsibility a lot. That the way our laws work, it places a lot of the responsibility automatically on mothers, and then fathers seem to get to opt in and out. But as men of God, I hope that we understand that if we want to build trust, we take responsibility. For me, that looks like very simple, silly things. So once upon a time, our dryer broke. I do not know how to fix anything. I'm a history teacher. But I thought I'll pull off the back and see if I can figure out what's going on. So I pulled off the back, and sure enough, the belt thing wasn't there no more. I knew that was supposed to be there, so I found the broken one. I went to Ascot, actually, the only place I could find that had parts for dryers. And I said, this broke, do you have another one? And the guy says, yes, that'll be $35. I'm like, it's better than buying a new one. So I grabbed that, went back home, put it back on, and it worked. And my wife has not loved me more than that particular day. There is something about just going, I'm going to take responsibility for that problem, and then just kind of giving it your best shot, that makes people attracted to you. People like someone that takes responsibility for things. If you've got a kid with some health challenges, it doesn't matter if you know what to do next. But if taking responsibility means, well, this is what we are going to do next. Well, let's just make a decision. And locking in that decision, saying, well, we're going to go to the doctor on Friday. That is you taking responsibility. And that's attractive. That builds trust. If the only thing you contribute to society is you are consistent and responsible, you are a man's man and have done a good job. The third thing Judah does, he's consistent. So for a couple of years in that toing and froing of being tested, he keeps coming through. And then later on, he has a chance to take responsibility, and he does, but he's also vulnerable. In that moment that where it's all on the line, Judah says, here I am, take me. My brother is in trouble. I will put myself in trouble's way to protect him. In a strange way, you become at your most powerful when you become your most vulnerable. That by saying, I will cop it, in so doing, people just trust you more than ever. I've got a team that I work with at work. I'm their manager. When I inherited this team, they were quite a dysfunctional team, actually. And so I read a book on how to make your team better because I'm a history teacher. The answers must be in books, right? So I read a book. It was called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. If anyone runs a team, feel free to read some of his stuff. It's not bad. And it was one of those weird ones where it tells a story rather than tells you what to do. And it was like he had a video in my team. Like it was just word for word the things I'd heard. Anyway, the first bit of advice he gave was force your team to share vulnerabilities about themselves, which, my goodness, how hard is that? But his trick way of doing it was to go around your room and your team and make everyone say something that they struggled with at school. Because it's far enough in their past that no one feels like you're going to be judged for it, but you're at least being a bit vulnerable, and so people will start trusting each other. And the crazy thing is that it worked mostly. Out of the whole team, it worked for all of us. All of us started getting on much better after that particular meeting, except for one person. Because when it got to her turn to speak, and you had to share the thing you were bad at school, she shared about a soccer team she was part of at school that was really bad. But then they got really good and won the grand final. That was her story. Her story was supposed to expose vulnerability, was actually the story where she won. Consequently, I mean, I'm not pointing it to that particular event. She already wasn't really trusted in the team, actually. But 3 months later, she quit. She left. And everyone was not unhappy with her departure. There's something weird about if you're willing to be vulnerable, people will trust you. But if you're not willing to be vulnerable, people kind of aren't. Like, can you really be trusted? If you can't, in the moment of a story around a table when every other person has told them about the thing they couldn't do well as a kid, and it gets to you and you can't still do it, how can we trust you in the big moment where we really need to trust you if you can't be vulnerable when it doesn't really matter? So building trust, Judah did all 3. And straight after that, what does Joseph do? He cries. And I'll just give you men permission that it is biblical for men to cry. There's a part in the Bible where it actually happens. Curiously, he goes into a room by himself to cry. But he cries so loud everyone hears anyway. That's what the Bible actually says. So, there you go. And then he comes back and says, hey, it's actually me, Joseph. And then they weep and they talk. It actually says they have a chat. Strange thing to put in there, but you know when a relationship is starting to be restored, when they can just chat again. They chat. Then he says, go get Dad. He can come move here. I'll look after all of you, and everything from here will be fine. So let's recap our lessons. I'll teach you a few more letters, okay, so that we can catch it. When it comes to Christianity and forgiveness, God wants us to forgive people. He wants us to do it daily. Therefore, forgiveness can come. Do your little F symbol ready? Fast. But just because you're forgiving someone doesn't mean you have to rush to trust someone. Because trust just takes time. It just does. There's nowhere in the Bible that says be quick and trust, and there's nowhere in the Bible that says be slow to trust. Okay, it's make a bit of a judgment call sort of situation. But I don't want you to feel pressure to rush to trusting. You're allowed to take time to trust. Trust just takes time. But if you need to build trust, he says, let us see, and we will do a little C. You need consistency. This is the R, responsibility, and this is a V, vulnerability. And if you're feeling like, mate, that sounds really hard, I don't think I can be those sort of things, I just want to encourage you, you probably already are. I reckon if I spoke to each of you, you probably are doing that stuff right now. There are people in your life that you are being consistent with, you're showing responsibility with, people who you're being vulnerable to. So I don't want this to be a message where we go, oh, I feel so awful. I want this to be a voice of encouragement for you and say, I know you're already doing it. Just keep doing it. Because if you keep doing it, trust will keep being built. So keep doing it. And when it's really hard, I just want you to remember the Jesus guy, right? Because this whole story, it's the first book in the Bible. These guys who wrote this book had no idea that Jesus was ever showing up. They didn't know that was the end of the story. But curiously, you can see hints of Jesus in this story right away, can't you? Because Jesus is the good and better Joseph. Jesus is our brother who forgives us and doesn't test us. He doesn't make us jump through the hoops in order to get his trust. He says, I see you perfect because I've taken the blame. I'm going to forgive you without making you jump through all these hoops over years and years and years. Jesus is the good and better Joseph who forgives us and invites us into his kingdom without strings attached. And Jesus is the good and better Judah. The older brother we wish we had, who should have been there stopping the bad stuff happen. He's the better brother who stops the bad stuff happen. He's the better brother who sees you in trouble and says, you know what? I'll take that guy's place. I'll take his place in the ultimate sense. Take his place on the cross. It's crazy that they wrote this story like thousands of years before Jesus even showed up, right? And Judah says, I will take the place of Benjamin, which is exactly what Jesus did years later. So you can see right in the beginning, Genesis, the beginning, they were laying the foundation for who Jesus would eventually be and what he would do. Jesus is your good and better Joseph, the brother that forgives you, invites you to his kingdom. Jesus is the good and better Judah, the good and better Judah who takes your place.
Thanks so much, Michael. You're awesome, a legend, and we really appreciate you here at Lifepoint. We love that message. Guys, please jump on to lifepoint.org.au. Make sure you fill in a Connect card online. This is a great way to keep in touch with us, to stay up to date with what's going on in the life of our church, especially events coming up or small group programs, or if we've got a break in our Sunday services, you want to make sure you know what's going on. Please know that you're so welcome, and we want to make sure everyone feels like a part of the family here at Lifepoint. Also, subscribe to this channel so you can keep up to date with other Church Online services over the next couple of months. Thanks everyone. Have a great week. See you next time.